"There is no reservation under that name," the front desk manager said, loud enough for half the lobby to hear. The words landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the polished marble lobby of the Grand Monarch Hotel in downtown Chicago. At exactly 8:14 p.m., beneath crystal chandeliers and soft piano music, every nearby guest seemed to glance in the same direction. Standing at the front desk was Alicia Monroe, a 44-year-old black woman wearing dark jeans, white sneakers, and a simple navy sweater. No designer handbag, no jewelry worth mentioning, no assistant trailing behind her. She looked like a traveler who had just stepped in from a long flight and wanted nothing more than a room key and a quiet night's sleep. The manager, Gregory Walsh, barely looked at the computer screen before shaking his head. "I checked twice," he said. "No reservation. You must have booked somewhere else." Alicia remained calm. She slid her confirmation email across the counter on her phone. The reservation number was clearly visible. Gregory glanced at it for less than a second before pushing the phone gently back toward her. "Those emails can be faked," he replied. A few people nearby exchanged uncomfortable looks. Alicia didn't react. She had seen that expression before. The assumption, the certainty, the instant decision made before facts ever entered the room. Behind the desk, a younger employee named Emily froze for a moment as she looked at the screen in front of her. Her eyes flickered from the reservation system to Alicia and back again. Then she quickly looked away. Gregory noticed. "Everything okay?" he asked. Emily hesitated. "I just thought I already handled it," Gregory interrupted. The lobby seemed quieter now. Even the piano felt distant. Alicia folded her hands in front of her. "Would you mind checking again?" she asked politely. Gregory sighed dramatically. "Ma'am, there is nothing to check." Then came the sentence that changed the atmosphere completely. "Guests don't usually make mistakes like this." The emphasis was subtle, but everyone heard it. A businessman waiting near the elevators lowered his newspaper. A family sitting near the fireplace stopped talking. Alicia tilted her head slightly. "Guests?" she repeated. Gregory offered a tight smile. "The kind of guests who stay in our executive suites." For the first time, a faint murmur moved through the lobby. The implication was impossible to miss. Alicia looked around slowly. No anger crossed her face. No raised voice. Just a long, thoughtful silence. Gregory mistook it for defeat. "There's a budget hotel about 2 blocks south," he added. "They usually have vacancies." Emily's eyes widened. A woman near the concierge desk whispered, "Did he really just say that?" Alicia looked back at the manager. The hotel lights reflected softly in her eyes. "Interesting," she said quietly. Gregory crossed his arms, convinced the conversation was over. What he didn't know was that the reservation existed. The room existed. And before the night was over, everyone in that lobby would discover that the name he had just dismissed wasn't simply on a reservation. It was on something far bigger. Alicia Monroe did not argue. That was the first thing that unsettled people. Most guests who were told their reservation did not exist would become frustrated, raise their voices, demand answers, or pull out their phones. Alicia did none of those things. She simply stood there, calm and composed, as though she were observing something far more important than a missing room. Gregory mistook her silence for surrender. He smiled and turned slightly toward another arriving guest, already acting as if the situation had ended. But Alicia remained exactly where she was. The marble floor gleamed beneath the lobby lights. The scent of fresh flowers drifted from a display near the entrance. A grandfather clock near the elevators ticked softly through the silence. Every detail felt deliberate. Every second seemed a stretch. What nobody in the room knew was that Alicia had chosen this night carefully. 3 weeks earlier, a series of guest complaints had landed on her desk. They came from different cities, different travelers, and different backgrounds, yet the stories sounded strangely similar. Guests being questioned more aggressively than others. Reservations challenged without reason. Assumptions made before identities were verified. Most executives would have forwarded the reports to a department head and moved on. Alicia never worked that way. She built her company by seeing things for herself. That was why she traveled alone. That was why she dressed simply. And that was why she was standing in that lobby without announcing who she was. Across the country, hundreds of employees knew the Monroe Hospitality name. Very few knew her face. She preferred it that way. The truth revealed itself when people believed nobody important was watching. Emily glanced nervously at her monitor again. The reservation was there. She had seen it. She was certain of it. The confirmation number matched. The guest profile matched. Even the executive suite assignment appeared in the system. Yet Gregory had dismissed it within seconds. Emily swallowed hard. She had only worked at the hotel for 11 months. Gregory had worked there for almost 8 years. Challenging him publicly could end badly. Still, something about Alicia's calm confidence made her uneasy. This was not the behavior of someone caught in a mistake. Near the fireplace, a woman named Sandra Whitmore lowered the travel magazine she had been reading. Sandra was a retired attorney from Milwaukee, spending the weekend in Chicago. She had watched the exchange from the beginning. The more she listened, the less she liked what she heard. Gregory was no longer checking facts. He was making assumptions. Sandra had spent 30 years recognizing the difference. Meanwhile, Alicia's phone vibrated quietly in her pocket. She glanced at the screen. A single message appeared from her executive assistant, Rachel Turner. Everything ready if needed. Alicia read it and slipped the phone away without responding. Not yet. The hotel was revealing itself. The employees were revealing themselves. And the night was still young. Gregory turned back toward Alicia with visible impatience. "Ma'am, if there is nothing else, I really need to assist paying guests." The sentence hung in the air. Several people nearby exchanged looks. Alicia slowly lifted her eyes toward him. Her expression never changed. "That is an interesting choice of words," she said softly. Gregory frowned, confused by her response. Emily felt her stomach tighten. Sandra sat forward in her chair. Somewhere in the distance, an elevator bell chimed. And for the first time since Alicia had entered the building, the lobby no longer felt like a luxury hotel. It felt like the opening scene of a very expensive mistake. Gregory's expression hardened the moment he realized Alicia was not leaving. The confidence he had worn so comfortably began to shift into irritation. He tapped the front desk with 2 fingers and glanced toward the security station near the entrance. "I have already explained the situation," he said. "There is no reservation available to check into tonight." Emily stared at her monitor again. The reservation was still there. Room 2701. Executive suite. Confirmed. Guaranteed. Paid in advance. Every detail remained visible on the screen. Yet somehow Gregory continued speaking as if none of it existed. Alicia noticed the flicker in Emily's eyes. She noticed everything. Years of building hotels had taught her that people often revealed the truth long before they spoke it. "Could you tell me your name?" Alicia asked calmly. Gregory seemed surprised by the question. "Why?" Alicia offered a small smile. "Because I like knowing who makes important decisions." A few guests nearby exchanged glances. Gregory straightened his tie. Gregory Walsh, General Manager. The title seemed to matter greatly to him. Alicia nodded slowly. "Thank you." The answer should have ended the exchange. Instead, Gregory leaned forward and lowered his voice just enough to sound condescending. "Look, let me save you some time. Even if you somehow had a reservation, those executive suites are reserved for premium guests. We have standards." The words settled over the lobby like dust. Sandra Whitmore closed her magazine completely now. The businessman near the elevators folded his newspaper. Even guests pretending not to listen were listening. Alicia remained perfectly composed. "Standards are important," she said. "I agree." Gregory seemed encouraged by her response. "Exactly." Then he made another mistake. "That is why we verify who belongs there." Emily's stomach dropped. Sandra's eyebrows lifted. The businessman looked openly uncomfortable. Nobody missed what Gregory was implying anymore. Alicia simply studied him. She had encountered executives like him before. People who believed bias sounded professional if wrapped in enough corporate language. Behind the desk, Emily finally gathered enough courage to speak. "Sir," she said carefully. "I think there might be." Gregory cut her off immediately. "I do not need help reading my own system." The sharpness in his voice silenced her. The lobby grew still again. Alicia glanced briefly toward Emily and offered a reassuring nod. It was a small gesture, but Emily felt it immediately. Across the room, a young woman checking in pulled out her phone and quietly started recording. She was not looking for attention. She simply sensed something was wrong. Others began paying closer attention too. The atmosphere had changed. This was no longer about a room. It was about how someone was being treated. Gregory noticed the growing audience and became determined to regain control. "Ma'am," he announced loudly, "if you cannot provide proof that your reservation is legitimate, I am going to ask you to step aside so I can assist actual guests." The sentence echoed through the lobby. Emily closed her eyes briefly. Sandra shook her head. Alicia did not react immediately. Instead, she reached into her pocket and slowly removed her phone. Gregory smirked, assuming she was finally preparing to leave. What he did not know was that the invisible countdown had already begun, and every word spoken in that lobby was bringing him closer to a consequence he could not yet see. The moment Alicia unlocked her phone, the tension inside the lobby shifted again. Nobody knew why. Nobody could see the message on the screen. But there was something about the way she stood there, completely unhurried while Gregory grew increasingly impatient, that made people pay attention. Gregory folded his arms. "Are we finished here?" he asked. Alicia glanced at her phone for less than a second and slipped it back into her pocket. "Not quite," she replied. Across the lobby, Sandra. Whitmore rose from her chair and slowly approached the front desk. Years in courtrooms had taught her when a situation was heading in the wrong direction. "Excuse me," she said. "I have been listening for several minutes. Has anyone actually verified the reservation?" Gregory forced a smile. "Ma'am, this matter is already resolved." Sandra looked directly at him. "It does not appear resolved." The businessman by the elevators nodded quietly. The young woman, recording on her phone, continued filming. What had started as a private disagreement was becoming something else. Gregory could feel it. So could Emily. She stared at the reservation screen again. The room assignment remained unchanged. Executive Suite 2701. Checked and confirmed. Emily swallowed hard. Her pulse quickened. Finally, she took a small step forward. "Sir," she said carefully, "I really think you should look at this profile." Gregory turned sharply. "Emily." His tone carried a warning. "I have already handled it." Emily hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay quiet. Yet the longer she looked at Alicia, the less she believed Gregory was right. Alicia had not argued. She had not demanded special treatment. She had simply asked for the room she had reserved. Nothing more. Sandra crossed her arms. "Then why are you afraid to check the system again?" Several heads turned toward Gregory. The question landed harder than anyone expected. For a brief moment, he had no answer. The businessman stepped closer. "Honestly," he said, "it sounds like she has been asking for the same thing this entire time." Verification. Murmurs spread through the lobby. Gregory's confidence began to crack around the edges. He glanced toward the security desk, as if searching for support. Instead, he found employees pretending not to watch. Nobody seemed eager to step into the situation. Alicia remained calm. The room seemed to revolve around her stillness. Then Emily made a decision. Before Gregory could stop her, she clicked open the guest profile on her monitor. Her eyes widened instantly. There was more information than she expected. Much more. Executive-level notes. Internal access permissions. Restricted identifiers she had never seen attached to a guest account before. Emily's breath caught. Gregory noticed her expression. "What is it?" he demanded. Emily looked up slowly. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Sir, I think you need to see this." Gregory stepped toward the screen. At that exact moment, Alicia's phone vibrated again. A new message appeared. "Monitoring active. Standing by." Alicia read it and smiled faintly. It was the first sign of emotion anyone had seen from her all evening. Sandra noticed immediately. So did Emily. And suddenly both women had the same unsettling thought. Maybe the reservation was not the real story. Maybe the real story was who Gregory had spent the last 20 minutes trying so hard not to recognize. Alicia watched the reactions spread through the lobby one face at a time. Emily looked nervous. Sandra looked concerned. The businessman near the elevators looked increasingly uncomfortable. Gregory looked irritated. None of them knew that the evening had already crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Gregory stepped toward the monitor and stared at the guest profile Emily had opened. For a moment his confidence wavered. His eyes moved across the screen. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of admitting there might be a mistake, he doubled down. "Close it," he said sharply. Emily blinked. "Sir, I said close it." The reservation disappeared from view. Several people nearby exchanged puzzled looks. Sandra frowned. "Why would you close the file if you were trying to verify it?" Gregory ignored her completely. His voice grew louder. "This conversation is over." Alicia stood perfectly still. The lobby lights reflected against the polished front desk. Outside, headlights from passing cars swept across the glass entrance every few seconds. The entire hotel felt suspended between two different realities. One was the version Gregory was trying desperately to maintain. The other was the truth slowly working its way to the surface. "Ma'am," Gregory said, forcing a professional tone, "I am asking you one final time to leave the check-in area." Alicia tilted her head slightly. "Because my reservation does not exist?" Gregory nodded. "Correct. Even though your employee just found it?" The question landed like a weight. Emily looked down immediately. Sandra folded her arms tighter. The businessman took another step closer. Gregory's jaw tightened. "You are misunderstanding what happened." Alicia did not respond right away. Something about the moment stirred an old memory. Suddenly, she was 16 years old again, standing in another hotel lobby hundreds of miles away. She remembered waiting for her parents after a long drive. She remembered the employee who assumed she was not a guest. She remembered being watched more carefully than everyone else in the room. Most of all, she remembered the feeling. Not anger, not fear. Exhaustion. The exhaustion of being judged before a single word was spoken. The memory lasted only seconds. Then she was back in Chicago, back in the Grand Monarch lobby, back in the present. Gregory was still talking. "We have policies," he said. "We cannot simply allow anyone to claim access to premium accommodations." Sandra shook her head slowly. "That is not what is happening here." Gregory ignored her too. The young woman recording from across the lobby continued capturing everything. More guests had started paying attention now. Conversations had stopped. Check-ins had slowed. The room felt charged. Alicia looked around at the faces watching. Then she looked back at Gregory. "Interesting," she said softly. "You keep mentioning policy." Gregory crossed his arms. "Because policy matters." Alicia nodded. "It does." Her phone vibrated again. This time she read the message immediately. "Internal review active. Full monitoring confirmed." Alicia slipped the phone back into her pocket. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth. Gregory noticed it. "Something funny?" he asked. Alicia met his eyes. No, her voice was calm. "I was just thinking about how different this lobby is going to feel in a few minutes." For the first time all evening, uncertainty flickered across Gregory's face. He did not understand what she meant. But Emily did. Or at least she thought she did. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the person standing calmly across the desk might be the only person in the room who knew exactly how this night was going to end. The clock near the elevators showed 8:37 p.m. when the atmosphere in the lobby changed again. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Yet something invisible had begun unfolding behind the scenes. Alicia stood quietly beside the front desk while Gregory tried to regain control of a situation that seemed to slip further from his grasp with every passing minute. "I think we are done here," Gregory said. "If you do not have business in this hotel, I need you to leave the check-in area." Alicia looked at him calmly. "I have business here." "Not according to our records," Gregory replied. Emily nearly winced at the statement. She knew it was false. Sandra knew it too. The businessman knew it. Even several guests watching from nearby seating areas seemed unconvinced. The problem was no longer whether a reservation existed. The problem was that Gregory appeared determined not to acknowledge it. Alicia's phone vibrated once more. This time she answered. "Rachel." Her voice remained soft. "Everything is active," Rachel replied. "Corporate monitoring is connected. System logs are secured. Video archives are preserved. Regional leadership has access." Alicia glanced toward the front desk. "Good." Gregory frowned. "Who are you talking to?" Alicia ended the call without answering. That seemed to frustrate him more than any argument could have. Across the desk, Emily reopened the profile after Gregory turned away. What she found made her heart race. There were permissions attached to the account she had never seen before. Internal executive access. Ownership level authorization. Confidential administrative notes. She blinked several times, convinced she was misunderstanding something. Then she looked at the name again. Alicia Monroe. The same last name displayed on company training materials. The same last name engraved on plaques hanging in employee hallways throughout the chain. A cold realization crept into her mind. Before she could speak, another alert appeared on the screen. Administrative review initiated. Account activity under observation. Emily stared at the message. Her mouth went dry. Gregory noticed her expression immediately. "What now?" he asked. Emily hesitated. "Sir, I really think you need to look at this." "Not now," Gregory snapped. "I am handling a customer issue." Sandra shook her head. "That seems to be exactly what you are not handling." A few guests nodded. Someone quietly laughed. Gregory's face reddened. The authority he had relied on all evening was beginning to weaken. Alicia remained completely composed. The lobby lights reflected across the polished marble floor. The piano music still drifted through the room, but it felt different now, like the soundtrack to a story reaching its turning point. Gregory folded his arms. You seem very confident for someone who claims we made a mistake. Alicia met his eyes. Because I know exactly what happened here. The certainty in her voice unsettled him. For the first time all evening, he seemed unsure of himself. Then Emily finally gathered enough courage to speak. Sir, she said quietly, I do not think she is the one who made the mistake. The words hung in the air. Sandra looked toward Emily. The businessman lowered his newspaper completely. Several guests stood from their chairs. And somewhere inside the hotel's corporate network, a chain of notifications continued spreading upward, carrying every decision, every comment, and every ignored warning directly toward people with far more authority than Gregory Walsh could imagine. A silence settled over the lobby that felt heavier than any argument. Emily's words lingered in the air. I do not think she is the one who made the mistake. Nobody moved for several seconds. Gregory stared at her as though he could force the sentence back into her mouth. Excuse me, he said. Emily swallowed hard, but held her ground. She turned her monitor slightly toward him. You need to read this profile. Gregory stepped closer. His confidence had become fragile now, held together by stubbornness rather than certainty. He scanned the screen. The color drained from his face almost immediately. Executive authorization. Ownership level clearance. Restricted access indicators. Internal administrative privileges. He blinked once. Then twice. That cannot be. Right, he muttered. Emily looked at him carefully. I thought the same thing. Sandra watched the exchange unfold from only a few feet away. The businessman by the elevators had moved so close that he could practically hear every word. The young woman recording lowered her phone for a moment, sensing something significant was happening. Gregory looked from the screen to Alicia and back again. For the first time all evening, he seemed to truly see her. Not her clothes. Not her appearance. Not the assumptions he had made the moment she walked through the door. Her name. Alicia Monroe. The same name that appeared throughout employee orientation materials. The same name displayed on framed company documents hanging in management offices across the country. The same name engraved on the bronze plaque mounted near the entrance of every property in the chain. Gregory suddenly looked toward the lobby entrance. Mounted on the wall beside the revolving doors was a polished dedication plaque. He had walked past it thousands of times without thinking. Sandra followed his gaze. So did Emily. Slowly, Alicia turned as well. The plaque reflected the warm glow of the chandeliers. At the bottom, beneath several lines describing the company's founding vision, one name stood out clearly. Monroe. The realization spread through the room like a wave. Emily covered her mouth. The businessman stared at the plaque, then at Alicia. Sandra's eyes widened. Gregory looked as though the floor beneath him had shifted. Alicia finally broke the silence. Her voice was calm, measured, unshaken. You spent nearly half an hour telling me I did not belong here. Nobody spoke. You questioned my reservation. Silence. You ignored your own employees. More silence. Alicia took a slow step forward. You denied a room to the woman who owns this hotel. The lobby froze. The words landed with absolute clarity. No shouting. No theatrics. Just truth. Sandra exhaled sharply. The businessman lowered his head in disbelief. The young woman recording raised her phone again. Gregory opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Alicia continued. The reservation was real. Her eyes never left his. The room was real. The problem was never the reservation. Gregory looked utterly lost now. Alicia's voice softened, but somehow became even more powerful. The problem was that you decided who belonged before you checked the facts. Nobody in the lobby could look away. The piano continued playing somewhere in the distance, but it felt very far away now. Gregory stood motionless behind the desk while the truth settled over every person in the room. And deep inside the hotel's corporate system, the next phase of the evening was already beginning. For several seconds nobody spoke. The lobby seemed suspended in time. Gregory stood behind the front desk staring at Alicia, as if reality itself had changed without warning. The confidence that had carried him through the evening was gone now. In its place stood disbelief. Emily remained frozen beside the monitor. Sandra looked from Alicia to the plaque and back again. The businessman near the elevators slowly shook his head. Then Alicia's phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a bell. She glanced at the screen and answered immediately. "Good evening, Rachel." Every person in the lobby listened. "The review is complete," Rachel said. "Regional leadership, compliance, and corporate operations have finished examining the logs." Alicia nodded once. "Thank you." Gregory swallowed hard. A cold feeling settled over him. He suddenly understood that the evening had not merely been witnessed. It had been documented. Every decision, every refusal, every ignored warning. Rachel continued. "We have verified that the reservation existed from the beginning. We have also confirmed that multiple opportunities to correct the error were disregarded." Alicia listened quietly. Understood. Behind the desk, Gregory turned toward his computer and hurriedly entered his credentials. The screen flashed. Then another message appeared. "Access restricted." He frowned and tried again. Same result. Emily looked at her own monitor. A notification appeared across the system. Administrative authority transferred. Review status active. Nearby employees checking guests into other rooms suddenly paused as similar messages appeared on their screens. The hotel network itself seemed to be responding. Rachel's voice remained calm. "Corporate has completed its preliminary findings." Alicia glanced toward Gregory. "Proceed." The lobby was so quiet that several guests could hear Rachel through the phone speaker. Effective immediately, Gregory Walsh has been removed from managerial authority, pending final review. Temporary leadership will report directly to corporate operations. Gregory's face lost what little color remained. Emily stared at her monitor. The title beneath Gregory's employee profile vanished. Sandra exhaled slowly. Nobody celebrated. Nobody laughed. The moment felt too serious for that. Rachel continued. "Additional personnel actions will be determined after interviews and compliance review. Employee cooperation will be considered." Emily looked down, overwhelmed by relief. Alicia finally spoke. "Thank you, Rachel." "One more thing," Rachel said. "The executive suite is prepared whenever you are ready." Alicia smiled faintly. "I appreciate that." The call ended. The lobby remained silent. Gregory looked as though he wanted to explain himself, but the words would not come. Alicia studied him for a moment. There was no anger in her face. No satisfaction. Only disappointment. "Do you know what the saddest part is?" she asked quietly. Gregory lowered his eyes. Alicia continued. "You never denied me because of a reservation. You denied me because you decided who belonged before you looked at the facts." Nobody argued. Nobody could. Sandra nodded slowly. The businessman folded his newspaper beneath his arm. Several guests exchanged thoughtful glances. The lesson had become impossible to ignore. Alicia picked up her overnight bag and turned toward the elevators. As she walked away, the atmosphere in the lobby felt completely different from the one she had entered less than an hour earlier. The marble floors were the same. The chandeliers were the same. The piano still played softly in the background. But the illusion that appearances could define a person's worth had collapsed in front of everyone who had witnessed the evening. And while the review process was only beginning, one thing was already clear. The consequences had arrived long before anyone expected them. The elevator doors closed behind Alicia with a quiet chime, and for the first time that evening she allowed herself a long breath. Not because she felt victorious, not because she had proven a point, but because the truth no longer needed defending. It was visible to everyone who had witnessed what happened. As the elevator climbed toward the 27th floor, the city lights of Chicago stretched across the night beyond the glass walls. Thousands of windows glowed against the darkness. Thousands of stories unfolding at the same moment. Alicia had spent more than 2 decades building her company one property at a time. She had negotiated deals in crowded conference rooms, walked construction sites before sunrise, and sat through meetings where people assumed she was an assistant instead of the person making the final decision. Success had never protected her from assumptions. It had simply given her the power to challenge them. When the elevator opened, a member of the evening staff stood waiting near the executive suite. Unlike the tension downstairs, there was only professionalism here. The employee greeted her warmly and handed her a room key. "Welcome, Ms. Monroe," he said. Alicia smiled and thanked him. The interaction lasted less than 10 seconds, yet it illustrated something important. Respect did not require special treatment. It did not require wealth, status, or recognition. It only required basic human dignity. Down in the lobby, the atmosphere remained unusually quiet long after Alicia had left. Guests resumed their conversations, but many found themselves discussing the same question. How often had they judged someone before knowing their story? Sandra Whitmore eventually collected her belongings and prepared to leave for dinner. Before stepping outside, she paused beside Emily. "You did the right thing," she said. Emily nodded, still processing everything that had happened. "I almost stayed quiet," she admitted. Sandra smiled gently. "Most people do. That is why speaking up matters." The words stayed with Emily long after Sandra walked away. Later that evening, corporate representatives arrived to continue their review. Procedures would be followed. Reports would be examined. Decisions would be made. But those details were no longer the heart of the story. The real lesson had already revealed itself. It lived in the silence that followed assumptions. It lived in the courage to question unfair treatment. It lived in the willingness to see people as individuals instead of stereotypes. Inside her suite, Alicia stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Her phone buzzed one final time. A message from Rachel appeared on the screen. "Everything is under control." Alicia smiled and typed a short response. "Good." Then she set the phone aside. The evening had never been about punishment. It had never been about proving she owned the building. It had been about something much larger. She looked out at the skyline and remembered all the people who had faced similar moments without the advantage of a title, a company, or a platform. People who had been underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked simply because someone decided they did not belong. Alicia knew the problem would not disappear overnight. But change never began with comfort. It began when someone chose to confront a broken standard and replace it with a better one. The lights of the city shimmered beyond the glass as she stood quietly in the room that had always been hers. And if there was one truth the evening had made impossible to ignore, it was this. She never raised her voice, she never demanded respect, and she never needed to announce her power. She simply let the truth arrive. Because real authority is not measured by how loudly you speak. It is measured by the standard you refuse to lower for anyone.